Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. One of the most engaging parts of a protagonist's journey is how they handle temptations. Whether it's how Frodo resists the allure of the power of the One Ring, or Luke refusing to join the dark side with Darth Vader, the real power of a hero is not their physical strength or skills, but their ability to say no to what is wrong. A few weeks ago, we looked at the story of Achan in Joshua chapter 7, where Achan gives in to greed and disobeys the command God gave to Israel. God told the Israelites not to steal anything from the city of Jericho after conquering it. But while going through the city, Achan sees a nice robe and some gold and silver and decides to take it for himself. This doesn't seem like much. We're talking about an entire city here. Who's going to care about just one robe and a little bit of money? But once he does this, God removes his protection from Israel. The very next battle they go into, they lose and are forced to retreat, all because one man gave in to greed. One of the most important things for the Christian walk is to understand how we deal with temptations. In this passage, James wants to emphasize we can't blame anyone else for the temptations we fight. People might be tempted to say, well, God is in charge of everything, so if I face temptation or give in to temptation, it's really God's fault. It's not my responsibility. The reality is the source of our temptations is our own desires. For that reason, we really need to understand what our desires are and which desires are good and which are bad. This is especially important now as we live in a culture that often tells us that we should pursue anything we desire. If you want it, go for it. If you desire it, it must be a good thing. Let's look at how Jesus was tempted after his baptism. Satan comes to him after he's been fasting and offers him three temptations. The first temptation is to supernaturally create food to eat. After all, Jesus had been fasting for quite a while and was certainly hungry. Why not take advantage of his power, the same power that created the entire universe, and just create food for himself? But Jesus refuses because that's not how his power is supposed to be used. He wasn't here to use his power for his own personal gain and comfort, but rather to use his power for the sake of others. He also knows that this is a time for fasting and seeking God. The Word of God was his food, not just bread. There would be a time for feasting and rest afterwards, but now was not that time. We too will always have the desires to satisfy our physical needs, to sleep, to eat, to be comfortable. And there is a time for that. But there's also a time to go without comfort, to maybe not eat everything we would like, maybe not get a full night's sleep because there's work to do. When I go to Haiti on mission trips, I'm going without comfort for a while. We don't have unlimited food there like we do here in the US, so I don't necessarily get to eat anything I want whenever I want. We make sacrifices to help those in need. Likewise, in life, we need to recognize when the right time to sacrifice is and resist the desire to focus just on ourselves. Another temptation Satan brings is for Jesus to jump off the highest building in the area to prove to the world that his angels would always protect him, to show off his power and his glory. This would have given Jesus great recognition and admiration, something we all want. We want people to know us, to respect us. We want love and community. And these are good things, but there's a right way to pursue them and a wrong, self centered way to pursue them. It's true that angels were protecting Jesus, but Jesus also points out that we shouldn't try to test God like that. The whole, okay, God, if you're real, do this for me. trying to conduct experiments or tests to see if God is going to protect us or something to that extent. Now, it's true that we should act with the faith that God is watching and protecting us, but those actions need to be based on obedience to God rather than just acting on our own whims. It's not a license to be foolish, but rather to take what Jesus says seriously when he talks about difficult things like loving our enemies or sacrificing to give to those in need. And when we are faithful to God in those things, we will find that we gain the love and respect and community we desire. But it's because we put others first, rather than worrying about our own reputation and image first. Then, of course, the last temptation is that of power. All Jesus has to do is bow down and worship Satan, and he could be the ruler of the whole world. Rather than going through the path of suffering to the cross, he could just be a king now. After all, isn't that what he's supposed to be? The desire for strength and power is a great temptation, and these things can be tools used for good purposes, but they should never be the goals themselves. More important than the strength to rule nations is the strength to live righteously, to do good, even when it's hard. At the end of the day, all these desires can be good, but the way we meet them is by pursuing God rather than the things of this world. A temptation is a lie that tries to trick you into thinking that the way to achieve a particular desire is to go against what God says. For Achan, maybe he had good intentions. Maybe he wanted to provide for his family. Maybe he wanted to have some extra money in case someone in his community was in need. But in his actions, he showed that he didn't trust God to provide. God had been supernaturally giving the Israelites food and water for 40 years in the wilderness. Yet Achan forgot all that and thought he could get away with stealing a little for himself. Sometimes it's hard to believe it, but God does provide, and part of having faith is waiting for his timing to provide rather than following the ways of the world. The real power to achieve our desires is found in resisting temptations rather than giving in to them. Think of these stories. As Frodo carries the ring to Mount Doom to destroy it, all the characters are faced with the temptation to steal it and try to use its power for themselves. Yet every character in the story who gives in to its power is eventually betrayed and killed by it. Frodo's real power is his ability to resist that temptation, and it's that power that allows him to prevail. Or consider Luke as he refuses the call to join the dark side, to give in to anger. In the end, it isn't his power or strength or ability to use the Force that wins the day, but his love and mercy that turns Darth Vader to the light. It's only because these characters resisted temptation that they were able to succeed. And in the same light, the more we resist temptation, the stronger we will become. Of course, there will be times we fail, and we'll turn to God for forgiveness, but we still get back up and continue to fight, remembering that Jesus died to forgive each and every sin. And be honest with God. Achan giving into greed wasn't even the biggest problem. It was the fact that he continued to try to hide it from God up until the last moment, kind of like Adam and Eve, who eat the forbidden fruit, then try to hide themselves, and later try to shift the blame when God confronts them. Properly confessing and repenting is just as important as fighting to resist falling into temptation. So let's not make the same mistakes as Achan. Recognize when you're facing temptations and think about what it says about the things you desire. Maybe God has a better way of meeting those desires. Maybe there are things that are bringing extra temptations into your life that you can cut out. And spend time seeking God daily, asking that He'll continue to lead you not into temptation, but deliver you from evil.